Good afternoon, and thanks for joining us for a Tax Practitioners Board webinar. My name is Ashley Dowsard, and I'm joining you from Ngunnawal and Ngambri country. I respectfully acknowledge the traditional owners and custodians of country throughout Australia and their continuing connection to land, waters, and community. I'd like to pay my respect to them and their cultures and elders, past and present. To begin, I have a few quick housekeeping messages. First, to obtain a copy of today's slides, you can visit our Webinars Resources Hub at tpb.gov.au/webinar-hub. We'll also email you a copy of the slides. Today's webinar counts towards your continuing professional education, or CPE, and you can claim 1 hour for attending. In relation to claiming your CPE, we will issue an attendance certificate to those staying on for the duration of the session. Today, we will talk about the relationship between the Code of Professional Conduct, whistleblowing, and confidentiality. In particular, we'll look at who can be an eligible whistleblower, who can you make a whistleblower disclosure to, the protections available for eligible whistleblowers, how to make a disclosure, the relationship between the code and confidentiality and whistleblowing. We'll also run through some polls and examples. At the end of the webinar, we'll dedicate some time to answering your questions. To help with that, we have Fiona from our policy and legislation team. She'll be responding to your questions as we go, so please submit them using the Q&A. To find the Q&A, simply move your mouse over the screen and a range of icons will appear. And you can disable any of these functions by simply unselecting Show Preview. We will also be turning off the chat once we get going to minimize disruptions. Before we begin, I'd like to introduce our speakers for today. TPB Chair, Peter DeCure, and our Investigations Director, Ryan McDonald. Welcome to you both. I'll now hand over to you, Peter, to kick off the presentation.
Thank you, Ashley. Good afternoon, everybody, and thanks for joining us. To begin, I'd just like to give you a little bit of background about the whistleblower legislation and just a little bit of updating on what's happening in the TPB and TASA space at the moment. On 31 May this year, the government passed the Treasury Laws Amendment, Tax Accountability and Fairness Act 2024. This Act amends the Tax Agent Services Act 2009, the TASA for short, and the Tax Administration Act of 1953. The key changes that we'll talk about are including extending of whistleblower protections to eligible whistleblowers who can make disclosures to the TPB, as well as disclosures to the ATO and certain other entities who may support or assist the whistleblower. Some public register changes that enable the publication of additional information that will appear on our TPB public register. The expanding of the TPB's investigation period, maximum period from 6 months to 24 months. This is to allow sufficient time for the most complex investigations. And also some information sharing with Treasury that will allow both taxation officers and TPB officials to share protected information with Treasury about misconduct arising out of breaches or suspected breaches of confidence by intermediaries dealing with and engaging with the Commonwealth. There's also information sharing with prescribed disciplinary bodies like professional associations. This will allow taxation officers and TPB officials to share protected or official information with prescribed professional disciplinary bodies to enable them to perform their disciplinary functions. These changes are aimed at enhancing our effectiveness as a regulator and will assist us to strengthen the community confidence in the integrity of both the tax profession and the overriding tax system. For today in detail, we're going to focus on the new whistleblower protections. So let's do a bit of work to unpack that now. The new whistleblower laws commenced on 1 July 2024. These laws extend whistleblower protections to individuals who blow the whistle about a related entity where they believe the information that they disclose to us may assist the TPB in performing our functions or duties under the TASA. The role of whistleblowers is important in the early detection and regulation of tax practitioner misbehaviour. This is why we encourage and welcome anyone to provide information about malicious or bad practices by tax practitioners or scheme promoters that would be harmful to the public or undermine the Australian taxation system. Previously, there was no protection for individuals if they disclosed information to us and they were exposed to significant personal and financial risk. These new laws will now protect eligible whistleblowers when they disclose information about an entity to us or to the Commissioner of Taxation. So let's have a closer look at what are the key changes. To qualify to be or for whistleblower protection, you must meet certain conditions. You must be an eligible whistleblower. You must make the disclosure of information to us or to the Commissioner of Taxation, and you must consider that the information you provide may assist us to perform our functions or duties under the TASA in relation to the entity or an associate of the entity. Prior to making a disclosure, you may wish to consider seeking independent legal advice to confirm whether you are an eligible whistleblower and can qualify for whistleblower protection. Eligible whistleblowers. To be an eligible, Section 14ZZTU of the Tax Administration Act defines an eligible whistleblower as an individual who is or has been in a relationship with the entity you are disclosing information about. This includes an officer, including a director of the entity, an employee of the entity, an individual who supplies services or goods to the entity, such as a registered tax agent or BAS agent, an employee of a person that supplies services or goods to the entity. An associate can include a relative or a partner of an entity or a trustee of a trust or a company in certain circumstances of the entity. A spouse, child or dependent of an individual referred to above or dependent of an individual's spouse. An individual prescribed by the Taxation Administration regulations in relation to the entity. Who can make a whistleblower disclosure? Who can you make a whistleblower disclosure to? So as I've mentioned, if you're an eligible whistleblower, you can make disclosure about a tax practitioner's misbehaviour to the TPB or to the Commissioner of Taxation if you consider that that information may assist us in performing our functions or duties under the TASA in relation to the entity or an associate of the entity. There are also some other options available if you want to disclose information about a related entity and be protected by the whistleblower laws. This includes the Commissioner of Taxation if you consider that the information may assist the Commissioner to perform his or her duties or functions under a taxation law in relation to that entity or an associate of that entity. An eligible recipient in relation to an entity such as a registered tax agent, BAS agent, or internal auditor of the entity if you have reasonable grounds to suspect that the information indicates misconduct or an improper state of affairs or circumstances in relation to the tax affairs of the entity or an associate of the entity, and consider the information may assist the eligible recipient to perform their functions or duties in relation to the tax affairs of the entity or an associate of the entity. What about if you're not an eligible whistleblower? If you're not an eligible whistleblower, you can still qualify for protection as an individual if you make disclosure to a legal practitioner for the purpose of obtaining legal advice or legal representation in relation to the operation of whistleblower laws, to a medical practitioner or psychologist for the purpose of obtaining medical or psychiatric care, treatment, counselling, including psychological counselling, or to an entity prescribed by the regulations. At this time, I'm not aware that any entities have yet been prescribed by the regulation. Let's move on to protection for eligible whistleblowers. Let's identify the identity protection. If you're an eligible whistleblower, it's illegal for us to disclose your identity or information that is likely to lead to your identification unless that disclosure is made to an authorised body, such as the Commissioner of Taxation, is made with your consent, or does not, or is about not identifying you and is reasonably necessary for the purposes of investigating misconduct or an improper state of affairs or circumstances to which your whistleblower disclosure relates, and we have taken all reasonable steps to reduce the risk that your identity will be identified as a result of the disclosure. Protections from civil, criminal and administrative liabilities. As a whistleblower, you will not be subject to civil, criminal or administrative liability, including disciplinary actions, for making a disclosure to us if you are an eligible whistleblower. For example, you cannot be sued for a breach of a confidentiality clause in a contract or have your contract terminated on the basis that the disclosure you make is considered to be a breach of contract. If a disclosure is made to us or the Commissioner of Taxation, the information you provide is not admissible evidence against you in criminal proceedings, and you cannot be penalised unless the information you provide is false. However, this does not prevent you from being subject to any civil, criminal or administrative liability for your own conduct that is revealed by the disclosure you make. You will also receive immunity from disciplinary action and cannot be sanctioned if you disclose information about your client. For example, there will not be a breach of Code Item 6, which states unless you have a legal duty to do so, you must not disclose information relating to a client's affairs to a third party without your client's permission. Ryan will talk a little bit more about this in some detail later in the presentation. After all that information, I think it'd probably be helpful to run through a few polls and put everything into context. Back to you, Ashley. Or Julie, maybe it's doing the polls.
Hi, Peter. I'll do them today. Yes, so the first poll that we have is a scenario. So in this first scenario, we have Angela, who is a tax agent and an employee of tax management professionals. So Angela observes Jason, her manager and senior tax agent at the practice, promoting special tax structures to his clients, which don't appear to meet the laws. So Angela discloses her observations about the tax structures being promoted by Jason to the ATO. She also discloses her observations about tax management professionals' unethical conduct to the TPB. So the question I've got for you is, in this scenario, do you think Angela qualifies for protection under the whistleblower laws? So the options that we've got here are yes or no. I'll just launch that poll for you now. So that should just pop up on your screen. I'll give you a little bit of time to put through your answers, and then once we've got those answers, we'll come back and we'll share those results, and Peter will advise us on what the correct answer is. We've got about 40% who have responded, so I'll keep it open for just a little bit longer to give everyone a chance. Okay, I might end that poll now. Thank you to everyone for putting through your selections there. So I'm just going to share those results, and it looks like, Peter, we've got about 93% of people say that yes, she does qualify, and about 7% have said no, that she does not qualify. So I'll hand back to you now so that you can let us know what the right answer is.
Thanks, Julie. 9 out of 10 is pretty good. In this case, clearly the answer is yes. Angela qualifies for protection under the whistleblower laws because she is an eligible provider, eligible whistleblower, being an employee of tax management professionals, and she's making the disclosure to the ATO will assist the Commissioner in performing their functions and duties under the tax laws in relation to the entity. In relation to her disclosure to the TPB, since the company is a registered tax agent and Jason is a supervisory agent for the company, Angela has made the right decision and will also be covered by whistleblower protections for this disclosure. When making this disclosure, Sandra also considers that her new breach reporting obligations under the TASA to ensure she complies with those obligations. For context, I'd like to make a segue here for a moment and share some information about the new breach reporting requirements that came into effect on 1 July 2024. Breach reporting requirements have been strengthened to support the majority of tax practitioners in their voluntary compliance with the professional and ethical standards. By raising the professional ethical standards of tax practitioners, breach reporting improves the provision of services and in particular enhances consumer protection and increases community confidence in the integrity of the system. As a registered practitioner, you must comply with your breach reporting obligations. This means you must notify us and the relevant recognised professional association, if there is one, if you have reasonable grounds to believe that you or another tax practitioner has breached the code and that the breach is a significant breach. When we talk about a significant breach of the code, we're talking about a breach that constitutes an indictable offence or an offence involving dishonesty under an Australian law, results or is likely to result in material loss or damage to another entity, including the Commonwealth, is otherwise significant, including considering any one or more of the following factors: the number or frequency of similar breaches by the tax practitioner, the impact of the breach on the tax practitioner's ability to provide tax or BAS services, the extent to which the breach indicates that the tax practitioner's arrangements to ensure compliance with the code are inadequate or is of a kind prescribed by the Tax Agent Services Regulations 2022. Determining if a breach of the code is a significant breach will be decided on a case-by-case basis, having regard to the particular facts and circumstances of any case. Consistent with our current approach to investigating general and whistleblower complaints, we will undertake a preliminary analysis of the breach notification, will make relevant inquiries, if applicable, and use information available to us to assess and validate the potential breach and mitigate the risk of frivolous, vexatious or malicious claims. We have some new information available on our website that provides more detailed guidance, including a fact sheet on breach reporting. I would highly recommend that you take a look. Let's go on to the next scenario, please, Julie.
Sure, thanks, Peter. And I'll just mention that we will share a link to that breach reporting information as well after the webinar today. So if you do want to have a look at that, we'll share that with you all. Okay, the next scenario here is looking at whistleblowing for fraudulent arrangements. So in this situation, we have Andrew, and he's a registered BAS agent. His long-term client, Claire, runs a gardening business and has requested assistance in seeking cash flow boost entitlements. Claire asks Andrew to lodge an amended BAS for her business to report false amounts of salary and wages and PAYG withholding. So when Andrew queries the legitimacy of the amounts Claire is seeking to have included in the amended BAS, Claire advises that if Andrew is not willing to lodge an amended BAS for her business as she has instructed, she will find another BAS agent who will. So Andrew declines Claire's engagement. While Andrew has not received Claire's consent to disclose this information to the Commissioner of Taxation, he decides to do so under the whistleblowing protections. So the question for you this time is, would Andrew be protected under the whistleblower laws, and has he complied with his obligations under the TASA? So once again, I'll just launch that poll for you. So that should just pop up any second now. And the options we've got for you to choose from are yes and no, once again. So I'll just give you some time to put those through. Okay, we're up to about 50%. So once again, I'll keep it open just a little bit longer. We've also got the scenario on the slide there if you did want to read it back. Okay, I'm just going to end that one now. Thanks everyone once again for putting through your selections. I'm just going to share that. So Peter, we've got 77% saying yes and 23% saying no. So I'll hand back to you now to tell us what the correct answer is.
Thanks, Julie. Obviously not quite as clear cut as the previous one. In this scenario, Andrew is eligible for whistleblower protections because he's disclosing information to the Commissioner as an eligible whistleblower, having been the client's former BAS agent. and this information may assist the Commissioner to perform functions or duties under the taxation law. In addition, Andrew will not be subjected to any findings or sanctions under the TASA for disclosing confidential information about Claire to the Commission. So let's move on to making a disclosure and how to go about it. You can only qualify for whistleblower protection if your disclosure is made to us on or after 1 July 2024. Disclosures made to us before that date will not be eligible for whistleblower protection. To make a disclosure to us, simply complete our online complaints form. When completing the form, be sure to provide as much detail as possible and include any relevant documentation to support your claim. Once you've lodged your complaint, you will receive an acknowledgement email with a reference number if you've provided your relevant email address in the complaints form. All complaints are reviewed and risk assessed, but not all complaints will lead to a formal investigation. However, the information you provide us is valuable intelligence and data to shape our policies, services, and compliance activities. If we determine that your complaint is a complaint we can act on, we will undertake further inquiries. This may include contacting you for further information if you have provided your contact details in the complaints form. On that note, I'm now going to hand you over to Ryan to talk about Code Item 6 and the confidentiality of client information requirements.
Thanks, Peter. In this part of the presentation, I'll discuss the relationship between whistleblowing and the client confidentiality obligation under Code Item 6. So, as I'm sure you're all aware, the Code of Professional Conduct regulates the personal and professional conduct of all registered tax practitioners. The specific area of the code that looks at confidentiality and relates to the new whistleblower legislation is Code Item 6. Code Item 6 states that unless you have a legal duty to do so, you must not disclose any information relating to a client's affairs to a third party without your client's permission. Importantly, under this code item, it's only necessary that the information relates to the affairs of a client. This means that the information does not necessarily have to belong to the client or have been directly provided to you by the client for Code Item 6 to apply. This is especially important to keep in mind when dealing with multiple entities that are connected, such as corporate groups or family groups where you're acting for one member of that group. So let's break this down a little bit further and explore what exactly is a third party. So a third party means any entity other than the client and the registered tax practitioner. This includes entities related to the client or the tax practitioner, engaged to do outsourced work, for example, another registered tax practitioner, a legal practitioner, or a contractor. Other entities that are within the same service trust structure, unless the client is defined, for example, in the engagement letter as the whole structure, and the use of maintaining off-site data storage systems, including cloud storage systems, which are becoming more and more popular amongst tax practitioners. So, unless you are disclosing information under the whistleblower legislation, which Peter has discussed previously, you need to take the following steps before disclosing any information relating to your client's affairs to a third party. Those include clearly informing your client about the information that you are disclosing, advising your client to whom and where the disclosure will be made, and obtaining your client's written permission. This permission might be via a signed letter of engagement, signed consent form, or other communication with your client. I think it's an important aspect to consider in all of your engagements with your clients, exactly what the scope of that engagement is and who will be assisting you with that engagement. This is where having a great letter of engagement can really help you define exactly who will be involved and who you're able to disclose information to as part of providing your services to the client. You can only disclose information relating to your client's affairs to a third party without your client's permission if you have a legal duty to do so or under the whistleblower legislation. If you have a client who is not acting within the law and you are an eligible whistleblower, the whistleblower legislation allows you to provide this information to the Commissioner of Taxation or an eligible recipient. Previously, if you'd done this, you would have been in breach of Code Item 6 and potentially faced sanction from the TPB for breaching that code item. So let's have a look at what a legal duty to disclose means and when you might have a legal duty requiring you to disclose a client's information. Some examples of this include where the TPB might have issued you with a formal notice under section 60-100 of the Tax Agent Services Act, or where you've received a direction, an order, a subpoena, or other requirement from a court or a tribunal, or you may have actually received a notice from the ATO, potentially under section 353-10 of Schedule 1 to the Taxation Administration Act. I note that sort of with these legal duties to disclose client information, consideration will also need to be had to legal professional privilege and whether it might actually apply to the documents that are being sought under that formal legal duty to disclose the information. If you're concerned about whether there is a legal duty to disclose client information that you hold to a third party, you should consider seeking independent legal advice to make sure that you are complying with your obligations, both under the duty that might be requiring you to disclose the information, but also under whatever it is that is seeking to require you to reveal or disclose those documents or information. At a more practical level, however, if you suspect that your client is acting illegally, the first step is always to talk to your client about it. You should be explaining to the client what their legal obligations are and seeking to assist them to comply with their legal obligations. If this discussion with the client does not resolve the issue, that's where you can then look to consider declining the engagement of that client. Also, if you think that the client may be acting illegally from a tax perspective and you do wish to blow the whistle, that's where it can be done to the Commissioner of Taxation under these new provisions. As we've discussed, under the new whistleblower laws, it is illegal for someone to disclose an eligible whistleblower's identity or information that is likely to lead to their identification. So there are some good protections there for you if you do decide that you want to blow the whistle and make an eligible disclosure. As Peter sort of indicated, whistleblowers are not subject to civil, criminal, or administrative liability for making a disclosure, and an entity cannot be sued for a breach of confidentiality under a contract because of their whistleblower disclosure. In relation to your obligations with the TPB, as we are looking at Code Item 6, there would not be a breach of it if you qualify for whistleblower protection. So to try and pull that together and sort of help make some sense of it, let's have a look at a few examples to put it into perspective. So in example 1, our first example is of Tom, a tax agent and partner in a tax and accounting firm. He becomes aware that another partner tax agent, Kate, has been disclosing significant details relating to her client's affairs to a third party without the client's permission, which is a breach of client confidentiality under Code Item 6. Tom discloses his observations about Katie's behaviour to us, the TPB. Tom is eligible for whistleblower protection because he's an eligible whistleblower, as he's an associate of Kate, and the disclosure to us will assist us to perform our functions or duties under the TASA in relation to Kate. So in relation to Kate, we may look to commence an investigation into her conduct, and if we do commence that investigation, we may look to have findings made that she's breached her professional and ethical obligations, and if so, she may have administrative sanctions imposed on her. Let's move on to example number 2. So in example 2, this involves an employee disclosing information about their employer to a registered agent. Mary is an employee at a car wash business. She discovers that some of her colleagues have been advised by the business to request cash payment so that the business can understate sales and avoid income tax. Mary makes a disclosure about the car wash business to Noah, the registered tax agent for the business, as she believes this will assist Noah in performing his functions or duties in relation to the tax affairs of the business. Mary is eligible for whistleblower protection because she's an eligible whistleblower, as she's an employee of the car wash business. Noah is an eligible recipient, as he's the registered tax agent for the business. Mary also has reasonable grounds to suspect that the information indicates misconduct in relation to the tax affairs of the business. And Mary also considers the information may assist Noah to perform his functions or duties in relation to the tax affairs of the business. If Mary makes this disclosure to Noah, then NOAA cannot disclose Mary's identity to anyone, except to the Commissioner of Taxation or another authorised person or body. Julie, we'll now pass it back to you to conduct a couple more polls.
Thank you for that, Ryan. So the first one that I've got here is about a registered tax agent named Caroline. So Caroline becomes aware that one of her clients, Montana Proprietary Limited, is pursuing a special tax structure which does not meet the new tax laws, even though she had provided advice against this approach. So Caroline is unsure if the whistleblower laws apply to protect her from disciplinary action. So she seeks legal advice from a legal practitioner in relation to the operation of the whistleblower laws. In doing so, Caroline discloses information relating to the affairs of Montana Proprietary Limited and their involvement in the tax avoidance scheme to her legal practitioner. So Caroline's disclosure to her legal practitioner is protected under the whistleblower laws. Is that true or false? So I will just launch that for you now. And again, we'll give you time to put through your responses and we'll see how you go. Thanks, everyone. I'll just give you a couple more seconds to put through your responses. We've got about 55% of people so far putting through their answers. Okay, I'm going to end that one now. So, Ryan, the result that we have here is 72% believe that it's true, that Caroline's disclosure to her legal practitioner is protected under the whistleblower laws, and 28% believe that it's false. So I'll hand back to you so you can tell us what the right answer is. Thanks.
Thanks, Julie. And everyone's doing quite well today. The correct response is true. So it's pleasing to see that people are following along and understanding how the whistleblower laws apply. So whilst Caroline has disclosed information relating to her client's affairs to a third party, being the legal practitioner, Caroline will not be subjected to any findings or sanctions under the TASA for disclosing confidential information about her client since she qualifies for whistleblower protection. Even if Caroline was not an eligible whistleblower, she would still be protected under the whistleblower legislation because the disclosure was made to a legal practitioner for the purpose of obtaining legal advice in relation to the operation of the whistleblower laws. And I think that's a key thing to sort of take away from this, is that if you are uncertain, there is always that scope to seek that external legal advice. So you don't need to go through and figure out how this applies on your own. Whether you are or aren't an eligible whistleblower, if you're seeking that advice from a legal practitioner, you will be protected and there isn't an issue around Code 6 applying to that disclosure. Julie, I'll pass back to you for poll number 4.
Thank you. This is our last poll for today. And this question involves the non-compliance with laws and regulations framework and a whistleblowing disclosure made to the Commissioner of Taxation. So this time we have Sharon, and she is a registered tax agent and an accounting professional and ethical standards board member. So subject to non-compliance with laws and regulation framework in the Code of Ethics for Professional Accountants. So we have Sharon here who identifies that a client's non-compliance with the taxation law. Sharon applies the non-compliance with laws and regulation framework and concludes that disclosure to the Commissioner of Taxation is the appropriate course of action. So the non-compliance with laws and regulations does not create a legal duty to disclose this information to the Commissioner, and Sharon has not received her client's permission to disclose the information. Sharon decides to disclose her client's non-compliance of tax liabilities to the Commissioner of Taxation. So in this situation, is Sharon eligible for the whistleblower protections? And I'm just going to launch that. Okay, so the options are yes and no again for this one. So I'll give you a couple of seconds or a bit longer maybe to put your responses through. getting a bit quicker. We've got about 50% this time. Okay, I might end that one now. So I'm just sharing those results once again. And it looks like we've got 64% are saying yes and about 36% are saying no. So back to you, Ryan.
Thanks, Julie. So yeah, once again, great to see the majority of people getting the answer correct, which is yes. So again, congratulations to those who've sort of got 4 out of 4 across the polls today. But yeah, Sharon is an eligible whistleblower, given that she is the client's registered tax agent, and she's made a disclosure which qualifies for the whistleblower protection. As Sharon's disclosure is eligible for the whistleblower protection, she won't be subjected to any further compliance work from the TPB in relation to disclosing the confidential information about her client to the Commissioner. So turning to the next consideration is, and before we sort of go to the Q&A section of the webinar, is I did just want to point out the importance of complying with your obligations under Code Item 6. If a tax practitioner discloses information relating to a client's affairs to a third party without the client's permission or without a legal duty to do so, the TPB may investigate and may find that the practitioner has breached Code Item 6. Ultimately, whether a practitioner has complied with their obligations under Code Item 6 will be a question of fact and will depend on the specific facts and circumstances of the case. If the TPB does find that a breach of Code Item 6 has occurred, then we may impose one or more of the following sanctions, being a written caution, an order requiring that the practitioner do something specified in the order, such as undertaking a course of education or working under the supervision of another registered agent, suspending their registration for a specified period, or in the most serious circumstances, terminating their registration and potentially imposing a period during which the practitioner may not reapply for registration, with the maximum non-application period being 5 years currently. So it is important that practitioners consider Code Item 6, both in their initial engagement with their clients, but then also throughout the lifespan of that engagement to ensure that they are protecting the confidentiality of the client's information. I'll leave it there for today and I'll hand back to Julie for the Q&A.
Thank you so much for that. Thank you both to Peter and to Ryan for the presentation today. We have had quite a lot of questions coming through, so we've got a bit of time to address some of those. So the first question that I've got here relates to qualifying for whistleblower protections with the TPB. So Peter, I might address this one to you and simply asking, how does one qualify for the whistleblower protection with the TPB?
Well, I think, Julie, it just goes back to those 3 early tests around making sure that you fit within all of the tests to be an eligible whistleblower. So you need to be it needs to be in relation to either your employment or an associate relationship with the entity, and making sure that you fit within all of those original tests. And it's about having the right relationship, so it should be in relation to a matter that that helps us or the ATO to perform our functions as the TPB or the Commissioner.
Great, thank you so much for that. Ryan, did you have anything you wanted to add there, or we'll move on?
No, happy to move on.
Okay, next one is if a tax agent an eligible whistleblower if a potential client wants them to complete their returns using inappropriate methods? So it's a situation where we have a tax agent who hasn't actually signed the client on yet, they're just a potential client.
Well, that's actually quite a technical one. If they haven't accepted the engagement yet, I think there is a risk that you wouldn't meet the precise tests. Yes.
Yeah, I think you're right. Yep.
Once you've signed on and you're an existing agent, you have the correct relationship.
Yep. Excellent. Thank you so much for that, Peter. Okay, the next question I've got here is what protection do tax agents have against disgruntled employees making unfounded complaints? Is there anything the TPB can do there in those sorts of situations?
And Julie, I think this is a really important question, and it's very similar to the position with breach reporting. When we receive complaints, as I outlined in the course of the presentation, we do a preliminary evaluation, we do a risk assessment, and if we see frivolous or vexatious, malicious type of claims, we're not going to pursue action with those things. And if perchance the person making the complaint is a registered agent, we would think that that sort of behaviour reflects poorly on the complainant in terms of behaviour that's behaving honestly and with integrity, would potentially reflect poorly on their obligations under the code generally, and it might be something that we took into account if we had to consider whether that person was a fit and proper person to be a tax agent. So I really would discourage anybody from making frivolous, malicious, or vexatious complaints, both in the sense of whistleblower type complaints and in the sense of breach reporting.
Thank you. I think that's a really good point to make as well.
Sure.
Well, oh, sorry, Ryan, do you want to add?
Yeah, I might just add, this isn't something new for us as well. We've previously received sort of malicious, vexatious complaints, and they've been appropriately dealt with through our complaints process. So I just want to assure sort of the audience that this isn't new or unfounded territory for us. We have previously dealt with those issues and will continue to deal with them in the appropriate manner.
Thanks, Ryan. Just while we are on the Dobbin rules, I've got a question here from Michael just asking, do the Dobbin rules apply now, or should we be waiting until the TPB has finalised its guidance around this?
Julie, the breach reporting obligations apply from 1 July 2024, and they very clearly apply only to breaches that occurred on or after 1 July 2024. If a practitioner is aware of a significant breach of the code, I would encourage them to report now. Now, there is guidance on our website, and I believe our finalised guidance has been released onto our own website. But anybody who has any level of uncertainty is welcome to contact the TPB directly through our phone line and discuss the circumstances. They'll get additional help that way.
Great, thank you. Ryan, anything from you on that one?
No, thank you.
Okay, I've got a question for you though now, Ryan. I won't leave you hanging too long. This one's about confidentiality, and this is asking, can a tax agent disclose client records to a liquidator without the client's consent? Is that considered under the legal obligations?
So if the liquidator has issued the requisite notice to the tax agent requiring the production of those records, then yes, they can. But there needs to be that requirement, that legal obligation to produce the documents. It can't just be a voluntary disclosure.
Great, thank you for that. Okay, the next question I've got here is, I'm a tax agent and my client ignores my advice to act lawfully and instructs me to stop working. The client then engages a new tax agent. What can I do to inform the new tax agent? I think this one's around confidentiality, Ryan, so I might throw it to you if that's okay.
Yep, sure. So it's a difficult circumstance to put a practitioner in, but unfortunately they can't disclose any of that information to the new agent. It'll be up to the new tax agent to ascertain whether the deductions claimed are lawful based on the information that the client is providing to them. You are, however, able to advise the ATO because you have a previous relationship with the client, and therefore you may be eligible for the whistleblower protections. If you are eligible for the whistleblower protections and you disclose it to the ATO, then you won't be in contravention of Code Item 6.
Thank you. Peter, did you have anything else you wanted to add there?
No, great answer.
Perfect. Thank you. So I've got another question here, which is asking about the whistleblower protections. And this one's just asking, are protections valid for complaints that are retrospective to the activity that took place before 1 July?
If the disclosure is made after the 1st of July, I believe they are.
Yep. Okay. Thank you. Another whistleblower question. Does the whistleblower legislation cover protection when the information provided is about a third party that is not a client? I think we sort of answered that one earlier.
Yeah, you've got to be very careful to make sure you understand exactly that you are an eligible whistleblower in relation to that entity. And it's so you need to be either an officer of the entity, an employee of the entity, an individual who supplies goods or services to the entity, i.e. a registered agent or BAS agent that's supplying tax or BAS services, an employee of a person that supplies those goods or services, or an associate of the entity itself. So I think that's pretty clear.
Great. Thank you. The next question I've got here is, if we're not an eligible whistleblower, are there other people that we can still qualify for protection with if we're making a disclosure about an individual?
As we said, you can rely on whistleblower protection if you're seeking legal advice as to whether or not you are a whistleblower, and you can also rely on whistleblower protection if you are consulting with your medical or psychological advisors about your own mental health issues associated with that issue.
Great, thank you for that. I've got Mark who's asking a question here about engagement letters. He's currently in the process of preparing them for this year, and he's wondering if he should be including information in there about the whistleblower protections and the requirements from 1 July. Who wants to take that one?
It's an interesting question. I think that I think it wouldn't be silly to put in your engagement letter something that puts the clients on notice of your obligations under the breach reporting amendments to the law. An agent's entitlement to use the whistleblower protections. I don't think it's something that needs to be disclosed in their engagement letter. No. It's a legal right for the agent. I think it probably would be a difficult thing to put into your engagement letter because it might discourage your client under some circumstances. But I don't believe there's a need to put that in there. No.
Thank you. Okay, the next question I've got here is from Aaron, and if he has a client that he doesn't engage because he suspects that they might do something wrong, does he need to report this under the whistleblower legislation, even though he doesn't know exactly whether they've done something wrong? So I guess if he has suspicions, should he be reporting it?
Yeah, I think there are 2 points to make here, Julie. One is that if you only have suspicions, I think it's not necessarily sensible to make a whistleblower disclosure. And I also would suggest to you that the agents have a positive obligation under the breach reporting rules, but you don't have a positive obligation under the whistleblower protection rules. The whistleblower protection rules are there to allow you the comfort of knowing that if you want to make a disclosure about something you believe to be wrong, that your identity will be protected and you'll have the benefit of the whistleblower protections. But the positive obligation part of it is for breach report.
Okay, thank you. Makes sense. Okay, the next question I've got is for you, Ryan. It's about client confidentiality. And this one is saying if your business partner wishes to set up their own business, are they required to get the client's permission to transfer the client records across?
Yes, great question, Julie. And the answer is yes. If your business partner is looking to set up their own business, go their own way and move clients over to that new business, then yes, they do need to be engaging with the client, seeking the client's permission to transfer them over to the new business, to the new entity, before moving any type of confidential information or client information over to that new entity.
Excellent. Thank you for that advice. I've got a question from Elizabeth now, and she's asking, do you need to advise clients that you have been reported? So yeah, is it a good faith gesture, or is there a requirement to tell your clients if you are under investigation?
I think, from the 1st of August, there will be the requirements under the new determination for the Code of Conduct, and there will be an obligation on practitioners to inform their clients of matters that are relevant to a decision to appoint or continue to appoint an agent. Now, the mere fact of an investigation itself may be reportable, but I think it's going to depend on both the seriousness and the likelihood of there being a problem. If there's been if an agent has been notified of an investigation on a minor matter that they think they can happily defend, then I doubt that there's a need to respond. But if an agent's been notified of a significant investigation and they know there's a problem, then they may need to give serious consideration to disclosing that to their clients. And you would definitely need to disclose if a significant sanction was imposed on you afterwards.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you for that. I've got a question from Michael now, and he is curious, does the person lodging the complaint hear back from the TPB on the outcome of the complaint, and how long would that generally take? So Ryan, that might be one for you.
Ryan, that's pretty normal procedure.
Yep, no, happy to answer that one. So if you've made a complaint to the TPB, then you may or may not hear back from us, depending on exactly what course the complaint takes. As we sort of indicated earlier on, some complaints are just used as intel or information to inform us around a practitioner's sort of conduct, whereas other complaints where they do progress to a full investigation, the complainant would be notified of the outcome of that investigation. So it does depend on exactly what the complaint is and what action is taken in regards to the complaint.
Great, thank you for that. I've had a few people asking about recordings of those sessions and whether they're available to be claimed as CPE. I can tell you that yes, we are recording today, and we also did record this morning. So both of those sessions will be available shortly on our YouTube channel, and you still can claim your CPE for viewing those recordings as well. Okay, I think we've probably got time for one or two more questions. This one is coming from Marco, and his question is, if a tax agent has already advised the TPB of an issue, are they required to advise the ATO as well, or is that just an optional measure?
Julie, what we're working on at the moment is a triage process between the ATO and the TPB to make sure that the whistleblower disclosures find their way to the right place. So if you have disclosed it to one party or the other, you're not further obliged to make that disclosure unless, of course, it was a disclosure under the breach reporting obligations to the TPB. But generally speaking, your complaint going to either the ATO or the TPB will be triaged and find its way to the right place.
Great, thank you. Okay, the next question I've got here is, how do things work within a practice when an employee of a client discloses to their tax practitioner? Is the tax practitioner allowed to speak to other employees involved in doing the work for that client?
I think probably the best way to approach that, if an employee has made a protected disclosure to the agent, the first thing they must do is be acutely aware of the fact that it's a whistleblower complaint. So they must make sure they take appropriate steps to protect the identity of the whistleblower. From there, I think it's appropriate for the agent to make sufficient inquiries in the preparation of returns or advice or BAS returns to make sure that the client is behaving in an appropriate way, and if it's clear that the client's behaviour is a material breach, then I think the agent should further on disclose to the ATO or the TPB under under the whistleblower protections. It may well give rise to a set of circumstances where an agent can't give rise to an appropriate outcome with the client, and then they may need to think about whether they want to continue to work with that client.
Fantastic, thank you. I might just hand to both of you if you've got any closing remarks, and then we'll close off the session. So I'll go to you, Peter, in the first instance. Is there anything else you wanted to add?
Thanks, Julie. And I think I really would just like to close by saying to everybody here, we understand that there's a lot of balls in the air at the moment, and there's a large amount of reform. The TPB team is working as hard and as fast as possible to get out the best possible guidance products to you all. In fact, we've got an out-of-session meeting of the Tax Practitioners Governance and Standards Forum with the professional bodies tomorrow morning to get some early feedback on some of the things. So we're working as fast as we can. Please feel free to reach out to the team if you have issues that you're struggling with, and look to our website and our newsletters and these webinars for ongoing updates and information. And thanks to everybody for your attendance today.
Thanks, Peter. Ryan, was there anything you wanted to close with?
No, just to thank everyone for their attendance today and for the great questions that have come through at the end.
Great, thank you so much. And we have actually received quite a lot of questions today, and I understand that we haven't answered all of them as yet, but we will endeavour to put together some FAQs and pop those up on our website in the next week or so. So just keep an eye out for those coming through, and we'll share some of the common questions that we've been asked today. So hopefully we'll address all the issues that have arisen. So just to finish up today, I would like to just share a little bit of information on how to stay in touch with us. If you do want some further information, our website is a fantastic resource. That's tpb.gov.au. You can also follow us on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter. And we also have our TPB e-news, which is issued each month. And I'd highly encourage you to subscribe to that on our website as well. And you can do that at tpb.gov.au/newsroom. And you can also subscribe to our YouTube channel. As I said, we do record all of our webinars and we place them up on YouTube, and you can still claim your CPE for viewing them. And Peter actually pointed out this morning, they're also a really good training resource for staff. So have a look at those. And just to finish up, I want to say a really big thank you to both Peter and to Ryan for sharing their insights today, and also to Fiona, who's been handling all the questions in the Q&A for us today as well. So thank you to all of you. And just to finish off, there's one last thing, and that is that we'll be launching an exit survey. So we would really appreciate it if you can take the time to complete it. It's a very quick survey, just gives us a bit of insights into what you thought of today's sessions, where we might have some room to improve on what we've done today. And also, if you've got a topic that is of interest, let us know in the survey as well, and we will look at potentially putting that topic on for you as well. So that survey will just open up in your browser when you leave the webinar today. So once again, I just want to say thank you to everyone for joining us, and we hope that we'll connect with you again soon. Thanks, everyone. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.